Hello guys, welcome back to another tutorial. Today I'll be sharing with you guys how I made this short. If it's something you're interested in, please keep on watching and let's get started with the video. So first we'll be drafting on our pattern paper, and right now I'm just going to take 1 inch at the top of my paper. Then I'll take another 1 inch by the side. This is the guide for drafting a trouser. I'll just take 1 inch by the side as well. So this 1 inch I took at the top of my paper will be my waistline. So I'll just go ahead and label it. Then right now I'll draft my waist to my hip line, which is 9 inches. You can use either 8 or 9 inches, or you can go ahead to measure on the person's body. So I'll just go ahead and connect the 9 inches that I marked. Then I'll label it as my hip line. Then next I'll take my waist to my crotch length. My waist. So the next measurement I'll take right now is my waist to my crotch, which is 12 inches. So you can go ahead and tell the person to sit on a flat surface and measure from the waist to the place the person is sitting on. That's how you get your waist to your crotch. Then I'll go ahead and just connect. So this line will also be my thigh line. So I'll just go ahead and connect, and I'll label it as my crotch line. So next I'll be measuring my waist to the length of the short. So I'll be using 20 inches. So if you want yours to be longer, you can add more inches to it. But for me, I'll be marking 20 inches. So I'll go ahead and use my ruler to connect. So right now, on my hip line, I'll add 1 inch to my hip circumference. So my hip circumference is 40. I'll add 1 inch to it to become 41. So that 41, I'll go ahead and divide it by 4. So the 1 inch I added is actually for ease. So for the 41, I'll divide the 41 by 4. And whatever it gives me, I'll mark it. So if I divide 41 by 4, it will give me about 10.25. I'll mark it on my hip line. So I'll also go ahead and mark that 10.25 on my waistline as well. And I'll also mark it on my crotch line. So right now I'll use my ruler to connect from the waist to the hip to the crotch. I'll just mark a straight line like so. So now I'll divide my waist circumference by 4. So whatever it gives me, I'm just going to go ahead and mark it. So my waist circumference is 32. 32 divided by 4 will give me 8 inches. Then I'll mark that 8 inches here. So right now I'll be adding 1 inch for my dart. So now I'll go ahead and use my hip curve to connect from that mark I made at my waist down to the hip line. So I'm just going to connect it like so. So next I'll measure whatever I have on my crotch line. And remember I added 10.25, sorry. I added 10. So that 10.25, I'll divide it by 4, and whatever it gives me, I'll just come out here and mark it. It gave me about 2.5 inches. So I'll just go ahead and mark it. So at this point, sorry, my camera didn't capture it. So I just marked a curve from that 2.5 I marked all the way to the hip line. So right now I'll use my tape to measure whatever it is I have on my crotch line all the way to the 2.5, and whatever I have, I'll divide it by 2. So I have 13 divided by 2 will give me about 6.5. Yes, 6.5 inches. So I'll just mark that 6.5. I'll make a mark here in the midpoint like so. Then I'll also mark that 6.5 on my hip line and also on my waistline. Remember, I'm marking at the edge of my waist all the way. I'll also mark it on my short length. Then I'll use my ruler to connect. So right now I'm going to mark the circumference of where I want my short to get to. If you want it to get to your knee, you just have to divide the circumference you have on your knee by 2. So me, I want it a little bit above my knee, and the circumference I have there is about 10 inches. So I divided it into 2, it gave me 5. So I went ahead to mark the 5 inches on both sides like so. So I'll use my curved ruler to measure, to mark from that 5 inches all the way to my crotch like so. Then at the other side, I will use a my curve ruler as well, but on the part that is not too curvy, or I can as well just mark a straight line like so to connect. So right now I'm going to add my allowance to the short, and I'm going to be using 2 inches for my allowance. So I'll just mark 2 inches downwards like so, and I'll use my ruler to connect as well. So right now I'll be taking my dart measurement, and before doing that I'll come down by 1.5 inches first from this line. That will be the band height. Then I'll come down by 4 inches from that 1.5 inches, and that will be my dart. So I'll mark half an inch on both sides like so. Then I'll use my ruler to connect. So when sewing, we are going to have to cut out the band first before adding the dart to it. So we're done with the front pattern. I'll just go ahead and label it. So right now I'll just go ahead and cut it out. So right now it's time to draft the back pattern, and I'll place the front pattern on a fresh paper like so. And when I'm placing it on it, I'll make sure I leave about 1.5 inches at the top. Then I'll use my pin to pin the paper down so that it doesn't shift when I'm tracing it out. So right now I'll go ahead and trace it out exactly the way it is. I mean exactly the way the front pattern is. I'll just go ahead and trace it out. So I'll go ahead and extend these lines like so, because we'll be using the lines to also draft the back patterns as well. So I'll just go ahead and extend it. I'll also extend this middle line as well, and I will go ahead and remove my pin. So now I'll use my ruler to trace it out like so. I'll just use my ruler to draw out the lines. I'll also connect all these marks that I traced out. I'll just use my ruler to connect them. So right now I'll just go in by 1 inch like so, and I'll come up by 1 inch. And the reason for doing this is so that at the back there's no gaping at the back, you know, that open space that is always at the back. So right now whatever measurement I have on this front piece, whatever it is I have on this front piece, I'll just go ahead and mark it on that 1 inch I came up by. I think I marked about 9 inches. I'll just place that 9 inches here like so. Then I'll mark it at the end. So I'll just use my ruler to connect like so. So right now I'll use my hip cuff to connect my new waistline at the back all the way to the hip like so. So from this crotch line, I'm going to mark 2 inches. I'm just extending it by 2 inches. This will be the crotch extension at the back. Then I'll come down by half an inch. So now I'm going to connect this place to this place. So I'll be using my curve to connect. So I'll just use my curve ruler to connect, and this is what the back crotch will look like. So my camera stopped recording at this point, but what I did was to connect that crotch extension. I just connected it down to the length of my shorts with my curved ruler. So this is how I placed my curved ruler, and I used my marker to mark it all the way like so. So for the dart at the back, I'll divide my nipple to nipple measurement by 2, which is 8 divided by 2 will give me 4. So I'll mark that 4 from here and all the way to the straight line that I marked in the middle. So that's where the dart is going to start from. So right now I'll come down by 1.5 inches as well, like I did at the front. Then from that 1.5 inches, I'll be marking 4 inches for my dart. So that's how I drew the straight line. Then I'll take half an inch on both sides like so. Then I'll go ahead and use my ruler to connect. So any allowance we are going to be adding will be added on your fabric when cutting, so please don't forget to do that. So we're done drafting the pattern for the back, and I'll just go ahead and cut it out. Please be careful when you're cutting so you don't mistake the front for the back. Remember, we placed the front while cutting the back. So this is it. This is what the back looks like, and this is the front. So remember, we drafted the band with this pattern. So right now I'm going to be cutting out the band, and the band height I want to use is about 1.5 inches. So I'll go ahead and mark that 1.5 inches. I'll use my ruler to connect. So right now I'll just go ahead and cut the band out. So now I'll be marking the band for the back as well, and I'll take 1.5 inches also. So I'll connect as well, and I'll use my scissors to cut it out. So right now I'm about to cut out the pocket holes for this shirt, and I'll mark 2 inches at the top, and I want the pocket hole to be 6 inches long, so 2 by 6. Then I'll just go ahead and connect. So right now I'll just go ahead and cut that part out. So now it is time to cut on my fabric, and as you can see, my fabric is on fold, and I'll be cutting the back pattern first. So I'll just place my pattern on my fabric, and I'll use my pin to hold it down. So before cutting, remember we didn't add allowance. So right now by the side, I'll be adding 1 inch for my allowance. So I'll add 1 inch all the way like so. Then at the top, I'm going to be adding 1/2 inch for my allowance. I'll also add 1/2 inch by this side as well. So the only difference is the 1 inch that we added by the side. That's the only place we added 1 inch. But here I'll be adding 1/2 inch. So now I'll use my ruler to connect all those marks that I made. So I'll just use my ruler to make a connection. That's for my allowances. So now I'll just cut it out. So this is my back pattern. So I'll add my allowances at the front as well, and as you can see, I'm adding 1/2 inch at the top and at this side. So I'll just add 1/2 inch all the way. Then at this other side, I'll be adding 1 inch. At the pocket area, I'll be adding 1/2 inch to turn it inside. So I'll use my ruler to connect. So now I'll just use my scissors to cut it out. So this is what your front pattern should look like after cutting out. This is what it should look like. That's if you're adding pocket. So right now I'll be cutting out the pocket bag, and I'll be using this lining for the pocket bag, and I'll just fold the lining into 2 like so. I'll just fold it properly. Then I'll go ahead and place my front pattern on top of it like so. So now you can see if I open it up, this is where the pocket bag is starting from. So now I'll go ahead and mark about 3 inches at this side to make sure that my pocket bag aligns very well. So is that 3 inches? That's where my pocket bag will start from. So at this point, remember we cut out 2 inches for the pocket bag. Then when cutting on the material, we left 1/2 inch for allowance. So right now I'll be adding 1 inch for it for my allowance for the pocket bag as well. So that's 3 inches in total. I'll just mark that 3 inches and connect like so. So the length of this pocket bag will be up to where my crotch is. So I'll just fold this place like so, and I'll draw a straight line to know where the length of the pocket bag will get to. So I'll just remove this place and I'll just go ahead and connect like so. So now I'll go ahead and cut it out. Remember, you're going to be cutting 2 pieces of this. So after cutting the second piece, I place them on top of each other, and right now I'm making a slight curve at the pocket bag, so I don't want it to be straight like this. So right now I'll just cut it out and you can see the shape. So this is what it should look like after cutting out the pocket bag. This is what it should look like. And this lining is not going to be showing on the outside. I'm going to have to cut out an extra piece for the outside part of this shirt. But before doing that, if you're using the same material that you're using for your shirt for the pocket, what you're going to do right now is that you're going to bring out both pocket bags like so. You're just going to bring it out like so. So after opening it up, you're going to place your shirt on top of it like so. That's at the edge of the pocket bag. You place your shirt on it. Then you go ahead and use your tape rule to measure that 3 inches that we left for the allowance. You just make sure it aligns. Then you just go ahead and cut it out. So if you sew this place together, this is what your pocket should look like. So remember I said that the lining is not going to be showing on the outside. So right now I'll just take 2.5 at this part and I'll trace it and cut it out. So this is what I'll be using to cut the fabric that will show on this side. So I'll just go ahead and place it on my fabric. Then I'll add 1/2 inch at this side. That's to attach it together. I'll just add 1/2 inch to it. And this is how it's going to look after sewing. This is what it's going to look like. So right now it is time to attach the pocket bag to the shirt. So now I'll place the side that I cut for this pocket bag. I'll just place it on top like so, and I'll use 1/2 inch to stitch it, and you can see what it looks like after stitching. So now I'll just flip it over and make a notch at this edge. Then I'll go ahead and just top stitch on this part. So this is what it looks like after top stitching, and you can see how flat it looks. So watch what I'm going to do at this next part can be very tricky. So I'll just open it and fold it over to this side like so. Then I'll just go ahead and stitch on top of it like this. If you're confused, you can replay the video. So this is what it should look like after stitching. So I'll just flip it over to the right side, and I'll go ahead and stitch on top of that right side so that you won't have any hole, or maybe the pockets won't tear. So I'll just go ahead and stop stitch on this like so. So right now it should look like this after sewing. You can see how neat it looks. So now I'll go ahead and stitch this front part down. You can use hemming gun to glue it together if you don't want a stitch on it, but for me I just went ahead to sew it down, and you can see what it looks like. So right now for this part, I'll just go ahead and pin my pocket bag down first to make sure everything aligns. So I'll just pin it down, then I'll cut out the excess for this part of the pocket bag after pinning it down. So when cutting, I'll leave about 1/4 inch to attach this part to this part. So for this other side to enter inside very well, I'll be using about 1 inch on the inside. So I'll just mark that 1 inch inside like so. I'll mark it all the way. Then I'll use my pin to hold this down to the 1 inch. So it should look like this after attaching the pin to it. See how it will look. and you can see that our 3 inches is still intact. So I've gone ahead to sew it down, and you can see what it looks like. So I'll just trim out the excess, or I'll just go ahead and weave it. So this is what it will look like, and you can see the inside of our pocket bag. You can see what it looks like. So now that we are done with the pocket, I'll go ahead and attach my shorts together, and the first thing I'll do is to sew the crotch parts together. So I'll place the 2 back pieces together like so. That's the front facing front, and I'll go ahead and attach this place with 1/2 inch. Attaching, I'll be adding my darts to it. And remember, I used 4 inches for the darts, but and right now I want to use 5 inches actually. So I'll divide my nipple to nipple by 2, which will give me 4 inches. Then I'll go ahead and mark that 5 inches downwards and connect. Then I'll mark 1/2 inch on both sides like so. Then I'll connect. Then I'll take it to my sewing machine and I'll attach it. Remember, you're doing that on both sides. For the front, I'm not going to be adding a dart to it, just the back I want the dart to be. And right now I'll go ahead and attach this part of my front and back piece together. So I'm going to use my pin to hold it down first before attaching. So I'm going to be starting from this middle part. So when I'm done, I'll be attaching my band, and first of all I'll measure what I have at the front of my waist, and I'll also measure what I have at the back. So I'll use whatever I have to cut out the band for these shorts. So I've gone ahead to cut out the band, and I use whatever I had at my waist at the front and the back to cut it out. And remember, this band is going to be 1.5 inches for the width, but I'll be adding 1/2 inch to it for my sewing allowance. And right now I'll take it to my ironing table. I'll just fold about 1/2 inch on the inside. I'll just fold it in like so. Then I'll go ahead and iron it. But when ironing, I'm going to make sure that one part is a little bit higher than the other one, because I'm going to be sewing the band, the waist of my shirt on the inside. So I'll just leave about a tiny bit on one side. So now I'm going to be fixing the shorts inside the band like so. So I'm just going to go ahead and use about 1/2 inch to attach it, but I'll fix it inside with 1/2 inch as well like so. Then I'll use my pin to hold it. So once I'm done using my pin to hold it, I'll just sew it down like so. So this is what it looks like after sewing the band. You can see how neat it looks. So right now I'll go ahead and attach the front piece to the back piece. I'll just use my body measurements to sew it, and you can see what it looks like. I also went ahead to add a zip by the side of it for ease, and now I'll go ahead and fold this part inside as well. That's the length of the shirt, the down part of the shirt. I'll use about 1.5 inches. And we have come to the end of today's video. You can see how neat and beautiful it looks. Please, if you've not subscribed to my channel, please do so. I really appreciate it. You can also turn on your notification bell to receive videos from me. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in my next video. Bye.